On my days between projects, I love to goof around my studio, and I was playing with my circle cutter and some fantastic Bosal foam, so I thought, hey, we can make frisbees. But instead, we're gonna make this awesome 3D circles touching circles quilt. Let's get started. Yeah, the problem with the flying fabric frisbees is my dog Winston loves to chase anything that flies. Remember, he's a miniature Labrador. And so with that, I had to realize maybe I better mount these bad boys to the wall. So today's tutorial is all about making these really fun 3D circles, and I'm using the ColorWorks Concepts by Northcott. It's a great fabric. I love the way that the geometric print works together in with all of the circles and the way that they touch back together. Super simple quilt. We just have a few steps to work through. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use our circular rotary cutter compass. Wow, that's a mouthful, right? But we're going to use that to cut some circles. If you make your circles about 7.5 inches across in their diameter, you'll find that you can get at least 13 out of your single panel of your print here. I think this quilt would be terrific with like hundreds and hundreds of circles. So anyways, about 13 per panel, about 7.5 inch circles. And then I also have a cool little quick tip on how to use your rotary compass. So I just find any spot that I really like. And of course I want to manage my fabric well so that I have as much possible for later. So I'm going to go ahead and start this cut. And so as I cut my circles of my fabric, I'm going to need as many printed circles as I'm going to need so for my solid circles, because I'm using solid on the back of the circles as we play. I mixed up my colors for fun. The demo we're doing today, we just have some cool Michael Miller cotton couture on the back. So as you have your circles made, let me make sure this is safe here. We're just going to stitch them together with our right sides together. Okay, so you're using a solid, so that's real easy. So follow me to the sewing machine here. Now, real quick, when I'm doing circles and things like this, what I want to do is I want to use some sort of fantastic edge guide on my machine or a 1/4 inch foot that has an edge guide on it. This one bolts onto the machine. I've been playing, I wasn't always a fan of the magnetic ones, but this magnetic one is so strong, I mean, you can really let it sit down and it will stay in location. So a seam guide is a great tool to have if you don't have one. We have them available for you in the description below there in that link. And for your, making sure I'm right sides together. Oop. And you know what? I actually prepped that one. Let's grab the two that I had prepped earlier. I know these are the exact same size. So we'll do this again. Right sides together just like that. And then over to the sewing machine and a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're also going to leave about a 3-finger opening so that we can turn it right sides out. So as I stitch, I'm going to back stitch so I can really tug on this. We're also going to be shoving Bosal foam inside of here. So we want to make sure that holds. Now the trick to sewing circles nicely is I'm kind of keeping the edges together of my fabrics about 2 or 3 inches out, and I'm putting a little bit of pressure kind of on the corner of my sewing machine on the fabrics themselves. And that causes them just to kind of naturally rotate underneath the presser foot. If you have an extension table on your machine, you could put your hand out here and that would do the same thing. But I'm just putting a little pressure here with my 3 fingers. Have a nice light, slow pace going. And as you get more confident, and with that seam guide there, you can actually go pretty darn quick. And then just make sure you leave enough of an opening, like I said, about 3 fingers so we can put the Bosal foam inside. Okay, so I'm going to stop. It's about 3 fingers worth. I'm going to back stitch so I can pull on it. Thread cut. Okay, now as we come back over here, I made all of my circles and stitched all of my circles together to start. I like Henry Ford style quilting. I do all of one project at a time or all of one part of that project at a time. However, the Bosal foam itself is going to be smaller than the circle. So once we get these turned right sides out, that's kind of when we want to measure what size our Bosal foam is going to be. And I strongly recommend you cut one Bosal foam first, slide it inside, make sure you like the way it fits, and then cut the rest, because you don't want to have to trim down the Bosal foam a little bit, and that seam allowance in there may add a little bit. So you're working your circles back out, and you can get a little firm with it if you need. And I can use my finger in here, and you see I'm kind of just pulling along that seam allowance, right? I also often use a purple thing or a Hera marker, so I could do something like this. If we get up inside of here, and we can kind of push and pull to flatten that out nice, right? And then I'm also going to take a moment to press it so that I can get a real good feel for what size circle to make that Bosal foam. So if this was a 7.5 inch cut to begin with, around 7 inches, because we had those 1/4 inch seam allowances, should be about right. So this will be easier to see this way. Now that Bosal foam is going to fit just about right in there. The easiest way to get it in there is to take it and kind of tri-fold it into the center. Now, I should talk a little bit about Bosal foam while we're doing this, because Bosal foam is a fantastic fiber that I love playing with. It quilts like butter, but it gives a lot of firm, what do I want to say, like a good rigid, stiff feel, kind of like Timtex, but soft. And it really gives some great character, and we could quilt through it if we want. I just chose not to in this project. The other thing is it comes non-fuse, one-side fuse, or two-side fuse. And the fusing can be really helpful. Like, let's say you were doing really large circles or something, and you didn't want the fabric to kind of sag, but you didn't want to quilt it. You could then fuse it to hold it down over time. So there's a lot of different ways to use this. I'm not going to bother fusing, and the Bosal I'm using is a non-fuse, so I can still press against it. Okay, I'm going to struggle with this for a little while. That's okay. Just get it all positioned down as we need, as we go. And then let me show you this. This is exactly what I was hoping kind of would happen. You may be able to see right here that it's actually, there's a lump, there's a ridge. So my Bosal foam that I tried to inset there was still just a little bit large. And that was the experience I had the first time too. I planned it for you this way today. So you would see, you don't want your circles bowing and things like this. You want them to lay nice and flat, just like this one does. And you'll still have this 3-finger opening, okay? So if it's doing funky curving and stuff, that means your Bosal is too large and you need to trim them down. So I'm gonna move on to show you how to finish this one. And what I first like to do, we're gonna top stitch the edges closed, okay? So make sure your machine's loaded with a thread that you like the way it looks. But one of the things I like to do is I use my lapel stick, which is a glue stick, and I'm gonna take and prepare to fold this edge under. So I'm gonna pull my fabric, and I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the inside piece of fabric like that, so there's a little bit of glue along there. And then I'm going to fold this up and stick it as much as I can. And then while that's there, and I'm kind of pulling back on the top fabric, I'm also gluing this down this way. Stick, stick, stick. And then I can fold the edge underneath and stick it and stick it. And then I just found, other than the fact that I get thread stuck all over me, that if I work it, let it sit a little bit, and pull it over, it works real nice. And then from that point, we can just come over to the sewing machine and get this top stitch going. And for whatever reason today, maybe because it's so nice and warm on our set here, my glue is not drying fast enough. So I'm going to stand here for about 2 minutes, but we'll be right back with this finished. So after just a few seconds of pressure, it's going to hold together nicely here. But what I want to do is I want to get that top stitching done right where the glue part is first. So I'm going to get that right under the needle. And at this point, I'm actually not using the 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm much closer to the edge. So we're just going to go ahead and top stitch this right along the edge. And you might even find, as I did, I've got 13 of these circles up in the quilt, that there is a little bit more of a flat spot where we do the seam or opening and the top stitching than the rest of the circle. And that's also the area we're going to generally match up the two circles. So if it looks a little flat to your eye, don't be concerned. You don't hopefully see it in the quilt behind you. Okay, and I'm almost done with this top stitching. And you notice I have the same pressure with my fingers. I'm just kind of real lightly letting the feed dogs move the fabric while my fingers do the guiding. Very easy. I'm just looking through that opening of the foot to make sure my top stitching is nice and easy. And here we come back to the end. And we'll just back stitch over that as well. And cut those threads, and we should be ready to go here. Okay, now that we have these, whoops, I'll end up now really stuck to stuff, right? So now that we have those, I want to show you how I join them together. And it's actually, again, a two-step process. Building all of your background pieces, because obviously, look over here at the quilt with me, if you will. Obviously, we've got these 4 circles sitting on top of the 9 circles in the background. So when I was doing this, I built the 9 circles first, and then I mounted the 4 to the top. The 9 circles are going to join together in just the locations where they touch. but the 4 circles on the top actually top stitch through and hold everything all together. So the finishing happens from these 4. But if you look at the way we join these, it's very simple. You'll need a couple of straight pins for this. Okay, and what I'd like to do is I wanted to manage all of my color and all of the energy of the quilt. So if you look here, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put kind of my blues together, my greens together, so brighter over here, darker over here, and when you look at the quilt behind me, you see that's what I did there. And then again, because it's such a graphic print, I wanted to line my lines up. So I didn't want these lines going all cattywampus. I wanted my lines to kind of line up. So I would pick an area, and I did join them or visually join them all together at first, so I could tell they're kind of square. I know that sounds weird looking at circles. But then once I have these, I'm going to top stitch right over this little section here. So what I want to do is I'm going to stick one pin in and through, and another pin in and through, like that. We're not going to stitch over those pins, but now you can see you can move it safely to the sewing machine. Just move that seam guide out of the way. And then make sure when you tack these, you're using the same color thread you did for your top stitching. And now we're just going to do another maybe inch of stitching. And back. And then once that's cut like that, you can remove the pins. And then those 2 units have now been joined. So what I found was the easiest way is I did 2, and you can see there's a little bit of flexibility at this point. You can still move things around. So then I want to make sure that all my lines are just the way they are. And then I'm going to come and I'm going to do the other 2. So we'll do those for you too. And then the time you want to be really, really accurate is when you're joining all 4 back together. Okay, I still like the way that looks. Now we're going to come over here. And I have to tell you, this was one of the most fun tutorials I have assembled this whole season. I really enjoyed not only the design process, but the construction process. And it's really a fun quilt. And I had a lot of friends come through the studio over the last few weeks while I was playing with this one, and they were really impressed. So it's really fun. I want to do a bunch more of these. One of the ideas I'm dreaming of is some fantastic, like a variegated, so it's kind of like a solid color, and then just do all kinds of ridiculous quilting through it where the quilting joins between the circles. I think that'd be fantastic as well. So I'm getting really, really excited about my 3D circles projects here. Now we've got those 2 together. Last thing we're going to do is join those. Let me do that for you really quick and we'll wrap it up for the day. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin in here. I'm going to pin here. Okay, so I've got those 2 pins, and now I need to do the same down below. So while I'm finishing this concept out, and I know you're all probably already starting on your 3D circles projects as well, we'll have to figure out as a community here on Man Sewing how many stacks of circles we can stitch together. So how many dimensions can we get into our 3 dimensions, you know? So these might have like 7 or 8 layers over time because that Bosal foam is just so easy to stitch through. Okay, here we go. I'm going to top stitch up here for these 2 together. And then I'm just going to slide those down, top stitch these 2 together, and then slide this over. Oh, thread cut real quick. And of course, you're going to want to take a moment and get all of those threads. Did you see that? I still have lapel stick on my fingers. Everything's sticking to my hands. I love it. So, and anyways, you want to be able to go ahead and trim up your threads because we want to, these are kind of finished working samples now. And you can still see there's just a little bit of flexibility. So watch again. I'm going to go back up to the quilt. Those 4 were basically sitting like right on top of here like that. And then as I had the 9 together in the background, I would top stitch here. I would top stitch here. Here, but I did start from the center and I worked my way out like a good quilter should so that I was able to massage and fix everything and adjust everything to keep it looking very cool and accurate right there. Remember, play with those cool lines in that ColorWorks concept fabric. It's really, really fun. And I want to see how many layers we can stack up with 3D circles here. We'll catch you next time. Man Sewing.